If you're someone that's easily triggered, it's likely a product of two things which are kind of complementary to each other, right? The first is that you've typically got unresolved trauma. This can be past life trauma, childhood trauma, and the nature of trauma is you're trying to avoid pain. So when you feel something that is in the area of a pain you've experienced before, you get triggered to try and avoid that pain. And the pain obviously is a psychological / emotional pain. The pain of rejection, the pain of uh, withdrawal of love, the pain of abandonment, the pain of being attacked physically. There's different types of pains. Now, some of these triggers, or I would even go to say most of these triggers are not real. They're from a time and a place that isn't in the current context. For instance, if you had a past life or a wound where you were attacked for something, you might still load up that same avoidance of pain in this lifetime, but you're not facing a spear to your neck, or you're not facing some sort of tribunal or something like that where they're trying to take your life, but you respond the same. Same goes with early childhood traumas and wounds, where maybe you respond in a way where the parents' love was conditional, and so you hedge to avoid the pain of love being taken away by not fully committing, and you try to avoid pain by exiting relationships or looking for ways to create separation or distance, which aren't really there, by holding things, taking things personally, holding things against others, that sort of stuff. So if you're easily triggered, see, most people get triggered in some way. Some people are better at managing that trigger. So if you don't want to be easily triggered, you need to have an internal frame of reference, and you need to have some sort of grounded basis in your own body. You have to be embodied in some way. So what tends to happen is, in the trigger, you associate with the traumatized part of yourself. You kind of go from big you, which has all the capacities and resourcefulness of all of you. Think of it when you're good, when you're calm, and you're relaxed. But when you're triggered, you kind of regress into the little you, where you've got very minimal resources. You get the resources associated with the situation or circumstance in which that trauma was originally created, which when you're in a fight or flight mode, or in real life or death situation or real trauma, your body kind of shuts down to preserve. And so you have less resources. So to prevent yourself from being easily triggered, you want to stay connected to those resources. And the way that you best do that is you stay completely associated and embodied as much as you can. And the best way to do that is to have a split awareness where you maintain half your awareness on yourself at most times. When you do so, when you always got a part of your awareness or presence inside of yourself, you tend to maintain and sustain the resources of you in your embodied self. So what I'm saying is you can begin to develop a resilience where, excuse the noise in the background, you can begin to develop a resilience where you can feel the trigger coming on. You can feel yourself wanting to disassociate or wanting to get pulled into the little version of self, but you choose not to go there. You instead maintain your connection with your body. You breathe, you feel the gravity of your butt on the environment where you're sitting. You start to hold on to your frame as you feel yourself getting pressed on by this thing that's attempting to try and trigger you. And so that's how you consciously begin to separate and be able to manage and have greater resilience to those triggers. It's a skill set that you develop over time. And so it begins with introducing a gap where it's not an automated response, where automated trigger. You develop this self-awareness where you start to feel yourself going towards the trigger. And then you kind of prevent yourself from going there by staying anchored in your own body and breathing And breath is super powerful because when you take deep breaths, it's a signal to your subconscious mind that you're safe. And so that's why there's a lot of, breath therapies going on when you hyperoxygenate your body. Because when you're saturated in oxygen, normally the way that the body encodes fears is you gasp and deprive yourself of oxygen. It's like, and you hold, and that's the way the body's, instead of just a nice calm. Just notice how you breathe massively affects your state. And if you're in a sudden shock breath state, it's a way to lock in that trauma, that association with fear to that particular event or catalyst, right? So the other thing is you can change your associations with the things that trigger. So you might begin to reprogram your subconscious mind. So what was triggering you in the past just simply isn't there anymore. So that's part of the subconscious healing, which also diminishes how easily you're triggered by things. You just don't feel the charge there anymore. So when you remove the energy of that past situation or circumstance, this like early in your childhood or past life, when you remove the emotional charge, there isn't the energy in when you are triggered to really cause a significant change in state. Now, next part of the question: are you aware of exactly what things you have an emotional response to that is out of your control? So this is becoming aware of your triggers. And you can ask yourself, you probably know yourself pretty well. If you don't, start to journal or write down the times when you're triggered. Start to see if there's a pattern. And when you become self-aware, the more self-aware you become, the more you'll pick up on this almost in the moment. You're like, I feel myself getting triggered. What am I getting triggered about? Oh, because I'm evaluating that, you're responsible for this thing happening to me. And so I'm blaming you, but I'm really blaming you to create distance because love is not safe for me because love can be taken away, as an example. So you become aware of your emotional triggers and they act as signposts for the originating traumas, and then you can go back to resolve them. And if you become proficient in resolving your own traumas, then, seeing your triggers are great. Most people get triggered and they avoid it and they stack their emotions on top of them and they get really angry and then they push even harder because they want to ensure that it never happens again. And then you've just really just become incredibly convicted to that trauma. Whereas if you introduce an alternative to that trauma, you allow yourself to experience more freedom. Because people who stack these traumas by avoiding resolving the triggers, they start to occupy less and less field of possibility because anything can trigger them. So they're constantly trying to avoid pain, which makes them less and less free. I can't do that. I can't do that. Whether it's in the area of sexuality, I get triggered if this happens, or in the area of dating, I get triggered if a person says this, or if it's in the area of, conflict resolution and with a partner, I get triggered when you say this. And when you try to make your external world conform to your triggers, not only do you hedge yourself in such you have less freedom, you start to reinforce your environment to keep those triggers. And so they end up really ruling your life, where trying to orientate around triggers is never a long-term solution. The way is to resolve the triggers. And if you don't know how to do it yourself, find a coach, professional, someone who's proficient at resolving those triggers such that you don't have to experience them anymore. Are you able to take a second and determine the reactions and consequences of your response? So here's the thing. Often, when a person's triggered, they lash out, they cause pain to other people, but it's like they feel justified. You said this to me, and that's why I got triggered and did all this other stuff. Well, if you didn't have the trigger, then none of the other stuff would have happened, and they likely weren't aware of your subconscious wound that when they accidentally tripped over it, or you subconsciously invited it and called forward, because this is the other thing that happens. Often, because our subconscious still wants to resolve these triggers and traumas, even if we, intently try to push them away. When we try to push those triggers away, another part of us wants to be whole, complete, and safe. And so it wants to resolve those traumas. So it invites the situations and circumstances from your external environment to meet and resolve those triggers. So you end up constantly getting triggered, constantly pushing it away, and you're in a vicious loop where the intensity increases until you observe the trigger and resolve it within yourself, and then you're free. Much more direct, much more simple. So when you start to recognize the impact of these triggers on your life, so let me think of something just recently. So there's someone that I'm familiar with that they wanted to control their environment to feel safe. And then the moment they start to feel uncertainty, they start to want to control things. The moment they're in that controlling frame of mind, they're in their limited self. They stop looking for possibilities and new opportunities, and they start to try and control their environment to keep things as they are and avoid whatever's painful, which then starts to make them feel more and more constrained and less free. But it's really because they're controlling their environment and they're seeing less opportunities because they're controlling their environment. They're unwilling to endure and experience pressure, and they have a very quick movement towards overwhelm. So this is another thing. When you start to stack your triggers on top of each other, your neurology starts to hold all this unresolved trauma. And so you often have a low threshold in your ability to remain calm still in the face of things that press on you. So you have less resourcefulness. So you're less likely to go for the things in life that you want, and you're less likely to endure when there's pressure because you've got this backlog of trauma that's somatically stored within the body. Right. And so there's so many trauma resolution methods, freedom techniques, to body therapies, to, holographic therapies, to Gestalt, to regressions, to, it just goes on and on. There's so many modalities that can help you to relieve that pressure and rewire your subconscious mind. So if you're not resolving your subconscious blocks and traumas, you're committing yourself to suffering, and you're committing yourself to less freedom, and you're committing yourself to kind of loneliness where you push people away, other than the really loyal ones who want to stick around, a person who's constantly avoiding a minefield of your traumas. And you're committing yourself to being less successful because you're less likely to go out, to take risks and endure the discomfort and pressure that's required of moving through the limitations, the blocks, the restrictions that your limited self and your restricted identity are affording you. So I hope that gives some insight into triggers and how they relate to traumas and how to best resolve them. But let's just see if there's any questions from the group from what I've just shared. Is there any questions from you guys?
Seems pretty straightforward. A lot of this was a very good reminder of many things that learned or studied before. And I really appreciate the reiteration and the reminder of these things, because in that moment when those things come up, it can be difficult to remember. Like theory versus practice, knowing it versus, okay, I'm going to actually do this. It is a very different thing when those emotions and those things come up and you have to say, all right, hold up, take a step back. We're not going to handle this like we usually do. And it is very much a learning curve. And we talked about yesterday with practicing gratitude regularly. It is something that until you repeat it enough that it becomes second nature, it is something you have to be incredibly conscientious and purposeful of, because that's the only way it's going to happen.
So as you're speaking, you raise a point. Often when we're triggered, that trigger becomes all-consuming. It's like we can't go forward. Nothing can happen. And we then start to overweight. Maybe these triggers only come up 5% of the time, less. But when they come up, they're so intense and they're so painful. It's as if they consume 95% of our reality. I can't go on. I can't do this anymore. This is horrible. I don't want to do this relationship. I don't want to do this business anymore. This sucks. This blah, 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 blah. It's so painful. And I'm like, how often does this happen? Well, when was the last time this happened? 3 weeks ago. And it was terrible. And I never want to face that again. I'm like, oh, and so how many good things happened between that event 3 weeks ago and now? Well, I guess, I don't know. I guess some things, but this is really bad. We'll just start to entertain it. Well, what are the good things that have happened today? This. And what about yesterday? This. What about the other day? This. And the day before that, this. So they're all consuming, right? You're all consumed in this trigger. And it's the end of the world. And of course, the trigger has to be strong enough for you to notice. So you want to move towards it and resolve it. But most people associate the intensity as something to avoid, as opposed to something that will free you. So, and the other thing is, if it's, for instance, if it's in a partnership or a business partnership or some circumstance that's, that is a significant part of your life, your parents, whatever. If it's really intense, where you start to associate with that person with, you hurt me. We hold on to it. You hurt me. You triggered my trigger, as if they're responsible because they were happened to be around at the time for why you're experiencing the pain. But the truth is, let's just say 99% of the time, maybe even more, you call that forward from the person in some way, where one person might experience that event as nothing, unrelated to any sort of trigger. You somehow manage to associate that event as being the perfect reason why you should be triggered. They're obviously doing it to harm you. Therefore, you're justified not only in being angry, but lashing out and causing pain on that person, which then actually gets maybe the outcome that subconsciously you're wanting of creating separation and distance, create safety. When really the person just, I don't know, just didn't take their shoes off at the right place, or they forgot to take out the rubbish, or whatever other reason that you find that they don't love you, or that they're clearly not caring of you, or they don't appreciate the relationship, or they mention something to a friend out of goodness of their heart. It comes back to you. You think that they're trying out to get you and trigger, attack you, this sort of stuff. And the thing is, when those events come up, when you're looking at self-awareness, you could ask yourself, is this the only way for me to see this situation? Is this the only way? Is this the only possible conceivable way? Because the mind wants to trick you to think it is. My perspective is right. No other perspective carries. Therefore, this person's against me, trying to hurt me, harm me. Therefore, I need to blame them and push them away. Right? And that's the limited self. They're trying to look through the lens of the original trauma, frame it in that perspective to try and avoid pain, but then they go about creating a whole bunch of pain for themselves and others. And that's the impact and consequence of that. So at my retreat, there's a thing that I do. I actually get people to declare their big triggers, the things that most piss them off. And then I get their two men to model it. I get another man to model the trigger and give it back to them. And men get really bloody triggered. And then I pattern interrupt it and have them come back to themselves. And then we do the trigger again, this time when they're embodied, when they stay connected to themselves, and they find that they're not so easily sucked into the trigger. And then we do it again a third time, and this time they respond with resourcefulness, right? They respond with resourcefulness. They're like, what would normally trigger them, they're just like, not only no longer, got the resourcefulness of staying connected to their body, they've got the resourcefulness to respond in a calm way with compassion. And so there's really a skill set. And another thing you can do is learn to sit in intensity. This is why I love nail boards. When you bring something up, it could be a trigger, can be an event, something you're avoiding, and you stand on a nail board, the intensity of that nail board is so intense. It's like the effect of an emotional pain in that moment. And when you sit in that emotional pain and bring yourself to calm, it's that buffering that I kind of talked about earlier on in my share, where your buffering is you feel the intensity of the pain coming up, but you can remain connected and resourced to your body, and you can sit in the intensity and breathe. You've got more resilience to the intensity to be non-reactive, to choose to respond to it rather than be react to it. So it's really a skill set that needs to be developed over time. And the more grounded, the more centered, the more embodied you are, the harder it is to trigger you, especially if you're really connected to yourself. And the next thing would be is to maintain what I would call energetic hygiene. Energetic hygiene is you maintain as best you can yourself in a resourceful state, meaning you take care of yourself with rising rituals. You clear things up if you feel they're brewing up with a partner. You do have the direct conversations. When this happens, I notice I don't like this. This is not going to work for me. You set boundaries. You say, this is the way I want to be related to you. I don't like when you speak to me in a negative way. Or if you start to notice your partner getting all rowdy and raising a voice and stuff like that, you can just invite them back to calmness. So you can be emotional. So my version of this is, I'm not going to stop you from being emotional. Be emotional, but don't make me responsible for that emotional pain that you're now directing at me. That's yours. Express the emotional pain, but don't try to make me the villain in your experience. Don't try to put that pain on me. And when you become really, really strong in your identity, in your frame, then you just don't tolerate other people putting this stuff on you, regardless how entitled they feel to do it. You say, unless you want to push me away, if that's what you're trying to accomplish right now, I encourage you to express your emotions, but just don't direct it to make me, to blame me as a perpetrator. I'm not your perpetrator, and I'm not interested in being playing that role for you. Right? So that directness is a pattern interrupt. You're safe, and then offers to do something good for them. You're safe. If you want me to make you a cup of tea, to give you a massage, to rub your feet, rub your back, whatever it is, I'm happy. This is to a partner. I'm happy to. But what I'm not available for is because you're going through some emotional intensity to be a punching bag. That grounded response and owning your sovereignty and not trying to make yourself smaller to fit within the frame of someone else's sensitivities and traumas helps them to be liberated from those traumas. You show yourself as safe. You're not emotionally reactive. You're responsive, but in a way that's calm and regulated and directive and penetrative and grounded and embodied. And then they're like, huh, oops, they'll be out of it. Then it's like, sorry, yeah, it's getting close to this time of the month. Or, wow, I really see that. I really see I'm being triggered right now. Now, different women have different levels of capacities for taking responsibility. I just happen to be in a relationship with a woman who's very, very good at taking personal responsibility. She's extraordinary. So kudos to my partner, Camelia. So if she ever watches this, but this also comes from my own groundedness, my own stillness, my own presence, and my own energetic hygiene. See, the thing about energetic hygiene that deserves a bit more of a mention, when you allow energetic messiness, name calling, dumping, there's not much, it erodes bandwidth for presence. It erodes the resourcefulness that you have to respond to situations because you're already nearing your limits the more that you allow it to continue until finally it explodes. And that's not an empowered way to handle situations of conflict or tension or pressure. So here's the next thing. Often I've got mosquitoes trying to eat me now. Often these uh, triggers come up more so in moments of pressure. And moments of pressure often come up more so when you're reaching the edge of your current predictable identity and you're starting to tap into the edge of possibility, and there's increasing resistance trying to keep you stuck where you're at. And so either you or both of you, or your partner or whoever getting triggered by and with, you're about to cross a threshold. So the pressure's increasing of what will keep you in your current identity and cause you to regress versus allow you to meet the pressure, move beyond that pressure, and find yourself in the realm again of possibility and a greater potential, higher potentiality, right? So times of pressure are often times of opportunities for change, right? Think about it. The pressure's coming up that if you then resolve the underlying subconscious limitation, obstruction, restriction, trigger that is there, that's preventing you from moving forward, when it's resolved, you expand your capacity, you expand your freedom, you expand your field of possibilities, you step into a greater tolerance, a greater ability to experience risk, things like that. All right. So yeah, there's this increase in possibility that begins to make itself evident. Have I still got people here, or did everyone jump out?
I'm here. I'm here.
You're here. Just Carl jumped out. So the pressure is the signpost that a catalytic moment is imminent. Is what I've come to understand. The biggest blobs, the biggest opportunities for if you seize them, for transformation, positive transformation and change. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time on the phone. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the sharing. Thanks for the opportunity for me to share some more wisdom here. Wishing you the most fantastic day. Thanks for those of you that are going to be watching this on YouTube. Look forward to seeing you in the next call. If you're interested, the details for these calls are in the Sovereign Brotherhood community. And the details to join the Sovereign Brotherhood community are in the captions below this video. Thanks for all for watching.